Chapter 1. The Discovery. The forest was quiet, too quiet for a Pennsylvania October. Ben Carter adjusted his backpack and pushed aside a low-hanging branch, sweat trickling down the side of his face despite the crisp air. The sun filtered through skeletal trees, casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor as the excavation team moved deeper into the woods. "You sure this is the spot?" Ben asked, stepping over a moss-covered rock. Doctor Marianne Keller, the lead archaeologist, stopped a few feet ahead and checked her GPS. According to the old survey maps, the anomaly's right up ahead. Undisturbed land. No record of settlement. Could be big. Ben wasn't convinced. He'd spent the last 3 months assisting digs with nothing to show but pottery shards and broken brick. Still, something about this site felt different. The air was denser here. He noticed it the moment they crossed into the clearing, like the forest was holding its breath. "Over here," one of the other students, Lucas, shouted. They gathered where Lucas had begun scraping away the topsoil. Beneath the first few inches of dirt, a smooth, flat stone emerged, covered in what looked like carvings. Not English, not even Latin. The markings curled and spiked like they were drawn by someone in a fever dream. "Those aren't natural," Dr. Keller murmured, kneeling to inspect it. "And they're not any known indigenous symbols either." Ben crouched beside her. "Could this be pre-colonial? It's not on any map. This forest's never been documented as a sacred site," she replied, brushing more dirt away. "But this is old. Very old." The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. Beneath the stone was a layer of compacted earth that crumbled like ash. And beneath that, bones, hundreds of them, stacked, layered, twisted together like roots. Some were small, like animal bones. Others were long and thick, humanoid, but oddly misshapen. Skulls with elongated craniums. Extra eye sockets. Jawbones that didn't match any known species. "Jesus Christ," Lucas whispered, stepping back. Doctor Keller didn't speak. She stared at the remains, her face pale. Ben could feel his heart pounding. "We need to call this in," she finally said. "Get the university, maybe even the Smithsonian." But as she stood, the wind picked up, cold and sudden, swirling leaves in a spiral. The sky, clear just minutes ago, darkened slightly, and a faint humming sound began to rise from the forest. It didn't sound like insects. It sounded like chanting. Far away, low and slow. Ben turned toward the trees. Did anyone else hear that? Nobody answered. They were all staring at the pit. The bones were shifting. Chapter 2. The Unearthed Skull. The sun was dipping behind the trees, painting the canopy in streaks of orange and red. As the team packed up their tools for the day, Alice remained behind at the pit. She'd volunteered to finish cataloging the bone fragments they'd uncovered. And truthfully, she wanted a moment alone. Something about the site fascinated her. Not just academically, personally. The carvings, the unnatural layering of bones. It was like the ground was hiding a secret too old to remember and too dangerous to speak aloud. She brushed away a clump of dirt and paused. There, half buried beneath the rest, was a skull. First, she thought it was human. But as she gently lifted it from the soil, her stomach tightened. It was larger than normal, longer from front to back. The eye sockets were enormous, oval-shaped and slanted, with thin ridges above them like insect carapace. But it was the mouth that disturbed her the most. It had teeth. Sharp ones. Dozens of them. Not flat like a human's, but pointed, jagged, like they were built to tear. Her fingers trembled as she held it up to the fading light. "What the hell are you?" she whispered. She didn't tell the others. That night, she wrapped the skull in a towel and placed it inside her tent. A part of her wanted to believe it was just a deformed animal, some evolutionary anomaly. But another part knew better. The wind picked up just after midnight. Alice sat up in her sleeping bag, heart pounding. She'd heard something, a soft rustle outside the tent, followed by the unmistakable sound of scratching. Not an animal pawing at the fabric. This was slower, deliberate. Like fingers, she turned on her flashlight. "Hello," she called, in no answer. She unzipped the flap and peeked outside. The trees stood silent in the moonlight, their bare limbs swaying gently. The campfire had long since died down. No one else was up, and then she saw it, standing just beyond the tree line. Maybe 20 feet away. It was tall, over 7 feet, thin as bone, with limbs too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Its skin was gray, almost translucent, and its head matched the skull she'd found. Large, stretched, and covered in scars. Its eyes, huge, black, unblinking, locked onto hers. Alice gasped and stumbled backward, falling against her backpack. By the time she scrambled out of the tent with her flashlight beams slicing through the dark, the thing was gone. But something remained at the edge of the trees. Pressed into the dirt were 5 long, claw-like footprints. Each toe ended in a sharp, curved point, and just beyond that, half buried in leaves, was a freshly dug hole, perfectly oval, roughly the size of a human body. Chapter 3: The Whispering Forest. The next morning, Alice looked pale and distant. She hadn't mentioned what she saw, only that she hadn't slept. She told Ben her dreams were strange, fractured images of figures standing motionless in the woods, their mouths open, though no sound came out. Ben was worried. She wasn't the only one acting off. Lucas had woken up covered in sweat, muttering something about a man with no eyes. Even Dr. Keller, usually calm and composed, seemed on edge, frequently glancing toward the trees like something might be watching. After breakfast, Ben decided to make the drive into the nearest town, a 30-minute ride down winding gravel roads. He needed to restock supplies, and frankly, get some space. The town, Dry Hollow, was small, barely more than a gas station, a diner, and a handful of rusted storefronts. While filling the gas tank, he struck up a conversation with the old man behind the counter. "We're camping a few miles east of here," Ben said, trying to sound casual. "Doing a dig. Forest land." The man froze, one hand hovering over the register. "You mean near Ashbrook Hollow?" "Maybe. There's no real name on the map." The man's voice dropped. "Locals call it the Hollow Ground. We don't go near it. Not anymore." Ben frowned. "Why?" The man looked him straight in the eyes. "Because nothing that dies out there stays buried. You hear whispers at night? Turn around and leave. Don't answer them. Don't listen." Ben gave a nervous laugh. "Whispers? There's a language older than any man. They say the forest still remembers it. And if you hear it, it remembers you." Ben left shortly after, the old man's warning gnawing at him. Back at camp, something was off. There were no birds, not even insects. The air was too still, like the entire forest had paused mid-breath. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. He found Alice standing near the edge of the excavation pit, staring into the trees. "You okay?" Ben asked, approaching cautiously. She nodded, but didn't speak. Her eyes were glassy, locked on something far away. That's when Ben heard it, a soft hum in the air, just barely audible. rising and falling like distant chanting. It wasn't coming from the camp. It was coming from the forest. He turned in a slow circle. The wind had picked up, brushing through the trees, carrying with it voices. Not English, not any language he'd ever heard. It sounded wet, whispered through water, like dozens of mouths speaking at once, just under the threshold of understanding. Doctor Keller emerged from her tent. Do you hear that? Ben nodded. Yeah, I do. As dusk fell, the shadows lengthened. The air grew colder. Lucas tried turning on music to drown the sound, but the speakers sputtered and died, though the battery had been fully charged. Alice hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Then she spoke, but it wasn't her voice. The words were low, guttural, twisted. A stream of syllables none of them recognized, uttered in perfect rhythm. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Stop it! Lucas shouted, shaking her. Alice blinked. And just like that, she was herself again. What? She said, looking confused. Why are you all staring at me? No one answered, because from the edge of the woods, something was watching again. Not one shape this time. Several, tall, thin, still. And as the last of the sun disappeared behind the hills, the whispers grew louder. Chapter 4. The First Nightfall. By morning, Alice was gone. Her tent flap hung open, swaying gently in the cold morning breeze. Inside, her sleeping bag was empty, crumpled like she'd left in a hurry or been pulled out. Her boots were still by the entrance. Her flashlight sat beside her pillow, the bulb flickering weakly. Doctor Keller called out into the woods. Lucas searched the perimeter, circling further and further into the trees. Ben found the blood that was smeared along the back of Alice's tent, dark, tacky, already drying in the crisp air. A handprint streaked across the canvas, as though she'd grabbed for it while being dragged. But there were no drag marks and no tracks. Nothing but silence. She wouldn't go into the woods alone, Ben said, pacing. She was terrified. She told me something was out there. She could have been sleepwalking, Lucas offered, his voice brittle. Doctor Keller shook her head. With this much blood? No. Something happened. Something's wrong here. They argued for hours. Lucas wanted to pack up immediately and head back to Dry Hollow. Dr. Keller was torn between the safety of the team and the potential historical value of the site. But Ben couldn't stop thinking about what the old man at the gas station had said. Nothing that dies out there stays buried. This site isn't normal, Ben said quietly. We all feel it. But this could be the find of the century, hell, of the millennium. Just one more day? We document everything. Then we leave. No one agreed out loud, but no one left either. By dusk, dread clung to them like mist. The forest grew darker faster than before. Shadows deepened unnaturally, swallowing the treetops even before the sun had fully set. No one spoke around the fire that night. They didn't eat. They didn't sleep. Lucas sat with his flashlight clutched like a weapon. Dr. Keller cleaned her glasses obsessively. Ben stared into the trees, trying not to think about what could be watching. Alice's tent remained standing, untouched. But no one dared go near it. Then, just after midnight, the whispering returned. It came in waves, drifting through the trees like smoke, rising, curling, wrapping around the camp. But this time, it was closer. Ben could hear his name in the middle of it. Ben soft. Sinister, he turned toward the sound and froze. Alice was standing at the tree line, naked, motionless, eyes wide open, pupils blown. Blood matted her hair, ran down her arms. Her lips were moving, but the words weren't hers. That language again, low and droning, filled with sounds that scraped the inside of the skull. Ben took a step forward, and she vanished, not ran, not turned, vanished, like fog under sunlight. The whispering stopped, the forest fell still, and Ben knew they were no longer alone out there. Chapter 5. The Journal. The morning after Alice's disappearance, or reappearance, if that's what it was, Ben couldn't stop shaking. No one had slept. Lucas refused to leave his tent. Dr. Keller just sat by the cold fire pit, staring into the ash. Ben needed answers. He returned alone to the burial site. The excavation pit gaped like an open mouth, earth torn away to reveal strange, contorted bones. But something drew his attention a few feet from the edge, a flat stone, different from the others. It looked placed, not natural. Its surface was carved with faint symbols, worn by time, but still deliberate. Crude stick figures with hollow eyes, circles within circles, a spiral at the center. He knelt down and pried it loose. Beneath, wrapped in brittle leather and stained with age, lay a journal. Ben brought it back to camp, hands trembling as he opened the stiff, rotting pages. The handwriting was elegant but archaic, the ink faded and smudged. The first entry was dated October 13th, 1674, that we have built beyond the valley now. The land is rich, though the natives warned us not to settle here. They call it Ada Nochi, the hollow ground. They say it belongs to the Dark Ones. Ben flipped through, each entry growing darker, more desperate. We found their graves, shallow, circular, no crosses, no markings. The bones are not like ours. Long fingers, sharp teeth. Some still bore skin, black as pitch, preserved in the earth like wax figures. They were not men. Further in, another entry. The priest tried to burn the remains. The fire wouldn't take. The wood turned to rot in his hands. That night, he walked into the woods, and we never saw him again. And then this, circled in heavy ink. Once disturbed, they will rise again. Ben's hands went cold. The final entry was short. Frantic, that we should not have dug. We should not have touched their dead. The forest speaks now, and it remembers every sin. It whispers to the weak. The ground is cursed. The earth is a mouth, and it is opening. Ben slammed the book shut. He didn't notice Dr. Keller behind him until she spoke. Where did you find that? He jumped. Under a stone, near the pit. She reached out and touched the leather cover, her fingers twitching slightly. This is colonial English. 17th century. This site. It's older than any documented European presence in this region. And these symbols, her voice trailed off. Her expression changed. Fear, true, paralyzing fear. Ben, she whispered, we need to go. Right now. But as they stood, the air around them thickened, the trees groaned. Not from wind, from within. Like something deep underground was shifting, turning, and from the shadows of the forest, the whispering began again. Chapter 6. The Return. Ben awoke to the sound of soft footsteps on dead leaves. It was well past midnight. The fire had gone out hours ago. The forest was silent, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed in from all sides, heavy and unnatural. He sat up in his tent, heart pounding, and then he heard the zipper, slow. Deliberate, he lunged for his flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. Alice stood just outside the circle of the cold fire pit. She was barefoot and soaked through as if she'd walked from the bottom of a lake. Her skin was pale, almost bluish, and her clothes hung in tatters. heavy with mud and water. Her hair clung to her face in long, wet strands. Her eyes, they were no longer hers. The irises were gone, replaced by endless pools of black. Alice? Ben whispered. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just looked at him, tilted her head slightly, like she didn't recognize the sound of her name. Behind him, he heard Lucas stir in his tent, muttering something in his sleep. Doctor. Keller stepped out from hers, gasping when she saw the figure. Alice, she repeated. My God, where have you been? Still, no answer. Ben reached toward her, but the air grew cold, freezing. His breath fogged instantly. Alice's lips parted, but only a whisper came out, raspy and too fast to follow. It wasn't English. It wasn't human. Suddenly, she turned and walked past them, slipping back into her old tent like nothing had happened. No one followed. They couldn't. That night, none of them truly slept. Lucas was the first to scream. Ben and Dr. Keller rushed to his tent and found him thrashing in his sleeping bag, clawing at the fabric as if trying to escape something suffocating him. His eyes were shut, but his mouth was wide open in a scream of pure terror. Ben shook him awake. Lucas gasped for air like he'd been drowning. I was underground, he sobbed. I was in a box. I couldn't move. I could feel the dirt in my mouth. My mouth. Ben. Later, Dr. Keller admitted to a similar dream. Waking up paralyzed, lying in darkness with the scent of rot all around her, hearing soil being shoveled over her face. Ben didn't say anything. He'd had the same dream that I in the morning. Alice was gone again. Her tent was still zipped from the inside. The only sign of her was a trail of muddy footprints leading to the burial site and stopping at the edge of the pit. Ben looked down and froze. The bones below had shifted. They weren't lying as they had the day before. The skulls, those strange, long skulls with razor teeth, were now turned upward as if looking at him. Chapter 7. The Hollow Ones. Ben sat alone, the journal open on his lap, the ink shaking in the morning light. His fingers were raw from turning pages over and over, desperately seeking some kind of explanation. The wind outside blew steady and dry, but the whispering had returned, soft, layered voices speaking in a language he didn't understand, crawling beneath the skin. Doctor Keller had gone to search the woods for Alice. Lucas was huddled in his tent, refusing to come out. No one spoke anymore. They were waiting, but for what? None of them could say. Ben read the passage again. They are not of us. The bones speak lies. They mimic the shape of men, but they are hollow inside, vessels for something else. When sealed, the forest slept. But now, it stirs. He looked up, eyes wide. It hadn't made sense before, but now it did. The settlers hadn't buried their own dead here. They had contained something. This was never a cemetery. It was a prison. Each body, each twisted skeleton wasn't a person, but a lock, a ward, a cage, assembled bone by bone to hold something ancient beneath the surface. And they'd smashed it open. Ben stumbled back to the burial pit. The earth had shifted again overnight. One of the long skulls now lay beside the edge of the trench, partially unearthed. He knelt, staring into its empty sockets. Its jaw hung open, teeth sharp like splinters. A strange, greasy blackness leaked from the soil beneath it, thick like oil, but with the faint stench of sulfur. He heard footsteps behind him. Turned at it was Dr. Keller, breathing hard, her hands scratched and bleeding. I found her, she whispered. Or something wearing her skin. Ben stood, his mouth dry. Where? In the woods. Just standing there, facing a tree. I called to her. No answer. She didn't even blink. Then she turned and looked at me. Keller swallowed, trembling. Ben, her eyes were empty. Not blind, hollow, like there was nothing left behind them. Ben looked back at the pit. The black liquid now pulsed slightly, as if something alive was moving just beneath that. He took a breath. This isn't a burial ground. What do you mean? It's a seal. A lid. A lid on something we weren't meant to see. Keller paled. You think we've opened it? Ben didn't answer. He couldn't. But as they stood there, a new sound came from the forest. Not the whispering. Something deeper, a low, guttural chant, rising like steam from the trees. Lucas screamed again from the camp behind them. But this time, his voice didn't stop. Chapter 8. The Blood Offering. Lucas was gone by the time Ben and Dr. Keller reached his tent. All that remained was a wide smear of blood across the ground, streaked with drag marks that led into the trees, and stopped abruptly, as if he'd been lifted into the AI arced and no scream. No fight, just silence and blood that made 2.1 Alice. Now Lucas Ben's hands trembled as he zipped the tent shut, as if that gesture could preserve something, anything, of the people they'd once been. But in his gut, he already knew Lucas wasn't coming back at least, not as himself. Keller sat on a log near the cold fire pit, her face pale and slack, staring at nothing. She hadn't said a word since they found the blood trail. Ben dropped to the ground beside her, the journal heavy in his lap. I was wrong, he said softly. This wasn't just a prison. She blinked slowly. What are you saying? He flipped to the back of the journal. The last pages were smeared, torn, but the meaning was clear enough. They feed on life to wear it like skin. The old tribe gave willingly, bled themselves dry to be reborn. A body for each soul, a vessel for each hunger. That Ben's voice cracked. They weren't burying their enemies here. They were sacrificing themselves, offering blood. The settlers tried to stop it, to seal the place, but they were too late. Some of the hollow ones had already made the crossing. Dr. Keller turned to him, her lips quivering. You mean? Alice wasn't taken. He nodded. She was chosen. The wind picked up around them, dry, unnatural, swirling in slow circles like something breathing in the trees. From the direction of the burial pit, they heard the scrape of stone shifting. Ben stood slowly. We have to go? Now. Leave the tents. The gear. All of it. But it was already too late. A scream ripped through the forest. This time, it was Rachel, the assistant dig technician. It came from the far side of the ridge. Then silence. Ben and Keller ran, crashing through underbrush, calling her name. They found her on the slope, on her knees, hands clawing at her own face. Blood streamed from her eyes and nose, and her mouth moved silently, lips forming shapes too fast and twisted to be human speech. Then she collapsed. Ben dropped beside her, checked for a pulse. She was still breathing. Barely, but as he touched her, her eyes opened, and for the briefest second, he saw someone else staring back. Not Rachel. Not human. He staggered back. She's next, he said hoarsely. Keller looked down at the girl, then over to the dark woods. And who's after her? Ben didn't answer. But deep in the forest, the chanting rose again. This time, it was closer, and beneath it, the ground began to move. Chapter 9. The Escape. Ben struck the match with shaking fingers and tossed it into the tent soaked in kerosene. Flames leapt instantly, bright and furious, devouring nylon, journals, maps, everything they'd brought. One by one, the other tents caught, until the camp was an inferno. Doctor Keller stood a few paces away, watching it burn. Her face was streaked with ash and silent tears. Rachel lay unconscious at her feet, breathing shallow and fast. "They'll come for her next," Keller said. "You know that." "I'm not leaving her," Ben said. "We'll carry her if we have to." The fire crackled behind them, sending up black smoke that curled toward the dark canopy above. For a moment, Ben imagined the smoke forming shapes, faces, teeth, reaching fingers. Then it vanished into the night. They turned toward the woods and walked. But 20 minutes later, they stepped back into the clearing they'd just left. The fire was gone, the ashes were cold, and the tents, all of them, stood whole again, untouched. Ben froze. "No," Keller's breath caught in her throat. "We just walked straight. We walked straight." They turned and ran, this time taking a different path, pushing through tangled brush and thorns, climbing over fallen logs, not stopping until their lungs burned. Another clearing, same trees, same pattern of moss. And again, the camp. Ben fell to his knees. "It's looping," he whispered. "The forest, it's not real. Or it's changed. It won't let us leave." Keller spun, eyes scanning the treetops. No birds. No stars. "It's like we're not even in Pennsylvania anymore." Ben stood slowly, feeling the weight of the forest pressing in from all sides. "We disturbed the hollow ground. Now we're part of it." A whisper curled past his ear, warm and wet like breath. He turned. Nothing. But the whispers didn't stop. They were everywhere now, beneath the soil, behind the bark, inside the wind. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. All speaking at once. Some begging. Some laughing. Some calling him by name. "Benjamin." He pressed his hands to his ears. "Shut up. Shut up." Keller was trembling. "I saw something," she said, "when we crossed that last ridge. Something watching us. Tall. Gray. Standing between the trees." Ben looked toward the dark woodline. They weren't alone. Not anymore, but he grabbed Rachel under the arms. "Help me. We keep moving. But no matter what we see, no matter what we hear, we keep going." The forest didn't want them to leave, but it hadn't sealed behind them. Not yet. They dragged Rachel deeper into the woods. The trees shifted. Branches grew where there were none. Roots cracked from the soil, twisting like serpents. The ground itself began to pulse beneath their feet, like a massive, buried heart was beating in rhythm with their fear. The hollow ones were awake now, and they were coming home. Chapter 10. The Final Grave. Ben woke, choking on dust. His mouth was full of soil, dry, gritty, bitter. He gasped and spat, blinking through darkness. Every limb ached. His arms wouldn't move. His legs were pinned. It took him a moment to realize why. He was in a hold Noah grave. Above him, a pale sky, gray, unreal. Earth crumbled around the edges as loose dirt tumbled down, landing in his face. He twisted, panicking, trying to lift himself. But the walls were steep, smooth, damp. His fingernails scraped at stone and clay. He couldn't climb out. Then a shadow moved across the rim that a figure leaned over the edge. Alice. She smiled. Her skin was pale like porcelain, stretched too tightly over her bones. Her black eyes gleamed with something ancient. Cold. Patient. She tilted her head slowly. "You shouldn't have come here, Ben." He tried to speak. "Alice, please." But more dirt rained down. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood Keller, expression blank, lifeless, and Rachel, and Lucas, all of them silent. All of them changed, hollowed, graves wearing skin. Alice reached down and gently tossed another handful of dirt into the pit. You dug up the past, she whispered. Now it's your turn to rest. Ben screamed. He clawed at the walls, coughing, gagging. His chest heaved as the soil reached his neck, his chin, his lips. He stared up, eyes wide with terror. The last thing he saw was Alice's face, calm and serene, watching him sink beneath the earth. Then darkness, then silence, and above, the forest stood still once more. Eno fired, Eno screams. Only trees, and a single mound of fresh earth where no grass grew, a warning etched in stone beside it. Some graves should never be disturbed.